Hi, my name is Terry Doherty, creator of the Glory and Empire series of tactical Napoleonic board games. Unclaimed Victory, Fuentes de Honoro, is the next entry in the series and is available for pre-order now at oldguardpublishing.com. Pre-orders will close on June 7th. Get your order in soon. So if they choose to change formation, they'll have to take a disorder check, which I'm not sure we want to risk. But then they wouldn't have to withdraw. They could fight it out in cold steel combat. So for example, these guys would have 3 strength points, which would be pretty good. They'd be in column versus line, so the French would get a better offensive fire shot than the British in column, which the British would be basically on the zero column, because the British in column, the British formed a very narrow quarter company wide column, which had very minimal firepower. It was entirely for maneuver and not for combat at all. But when you're in the village and you're in a column formation, you're in the streets in column, so you don't have much firepower. If you're an SED in the village, then you're basically in the buildings, behind walls, or wherever they can seek cover. So it's much better in terms of fire combat to be in SED in villages. However, we can have say these guys back here try and change formation, so they'll change into column, so that they can help cover the village. So he has to take a disorder check for that. 72, he passes, and this guy will face that way. So then if when these guys are forced to retreat during withdrawal before combat, the French in a follow-on assault could potentially hit these guys. And if they were in SED, they'd be forced to retreat as well. So this guy has to take a disorder check. 20, so he fails, so that's the risk of changing formation. And I think these other guys, we will just leave them alone for now and change what happens in the following turn. So basically all these guys have moved during the player segment, and they will really not move during the British turn, except for this guy, during the British phasing side. Okay, so that's it for reserve movement. So now we'll go into close combat, and we'll just go up the line here. So looking at the sequence, there's no empty target X, so withdraw before combat. So SED units in company SED units have to withdraw before combat, and they go back 2 to 3 hexes, and then enter disorder. The exception is if they're in a fortified post, where they can stay in the hex. So these guys will pull out of here and just go back a couple hexes to here, and then they will enter disorder. Okay, so then the target hex is now empty, so the assaulting units advance, and we're going to have to enter column. So we go switch into column and enter into the hex. And then we're going to skip all the way down to, I guess that's advance after combat. At least one unit has to advance, and then everybody ends the assault in disorder. So we're going to retain that marker, retain our skirmishers marker, but we're going to be a disordered column at this point. Now we're going to try and declare a really flopping the counters around today. Declare a follow-on assault against this stack there, the 94th foot. And I guess one other thing, if I had left these guys in SED formation, when these guys entered this hex as advance after combat, these guys would have got to fire at him as reaction fire. But since they switched to column, they don't get that reaction fire zone any longer. So that's one disadvantage. But they will get to fight a more regular close combat if these guys pass their morale check to make a follow-on assault. They rolled an 85, so they will do a follow-on assault. So then we go through the whole thing again. So they don't have to withdraw because they're in regular column. No advance into empty target. So attack and morale check. So this is what is going to potentially hang the French on their petard here is their morale check. So they're going to have 34. They're going to be subtracting 10 because it's an assault method violation, which they retain because they started the assault in line. And minus 5 for the disorder checks. So they're looking at 15, so that's pretty close to 50% chance of fail. And they roll a 20. So they will become shaken and fall back a hex. And that concludes the assault for those Frenchmen, and the British get off scot-free there. Okay, so then we're going to do the same thing here. So this guy has to go back 2 to 3 hexes. These guys get to advance. These guys will get to shoot at them with reaction fire. So that'll be 3. They're now in, I guess it's at the 2 hex range there. So they are still in line with their skirmishers out. So that'll be 3 minus 1 on the 2 column. They roll a 62, which is a morale check minus 10. With French roll 64, so they're good. So again, they changed the line to enter the MDT hex. And now they're going to declare a follow-on assault against that guy. Which we go back to the beginning of the sequence. I guess we should enter disorder first. At the end of the assault, in the first phase, the first assault. So we have to take a morale check to do a follow-on assault. 42, which they're minus 5. But their leader helps them there, Baychot, so they will pass. They will get to do a follow-on assault. And so the follow-on assault you get to do only once. You can't keep follow-on assault, and like clear the whole village. That would be kind of silly. But for the follow-on assault to do it, you have to pass a morale check. So if they failed the morale check, they'd become shaken and drop back a hex. But anyways, they pass, so they're going to, these guys have to go back 2 to 3. So they will go back to here this time. Oops, and they have to enter disorder. I forgot that with the last unit as well. After they conduct a withdraw before combat. And we didn't want to go back to there because we want to have room for the 83rd Foot to get in there and counterattack if necessary. So then the hex is now empty, so these guys have to advance. So they advance into that hex, and that guy cannot reaction fire because he's being assaulted by these guys. With the assumption being that that's where their attention is, and they've potentially already emptied their muskets in their first reaction fire that they dished out against the guys approaching them for the assault. So these guys are done. They can't do any more follow-on assaults. So we get rid of that assault marker. So now we'll go here, and it's the same thing. So these guys will have to go back 2 hexes, and they will follow back through here. They couldn't go back 3, but there's no real reason to at this point. And the reason you go back 2 to 3 is so they're not immediately subject to another assault again from the same unit that just assaulted them. So again, these guys will advance and they will face that way. They're going to end up in disorder for their end of the assault. And we're going to be optimistic here and try and hit the fortified post. So these guys will get to reaction fire when they enter the hex. So So they're going to have 3, and it's going to be -1 because of their skirmishers. And again, that takes place at the 2 hex range. And so this case, for skirmishers, their reaction fire zone is described as their front hexes and not their zone of control. So artillery, and conversely, has their fire reaction zone, and regular infantry, not with skirmishers, have their reaction fire zone as their zones of control. But skirmishers are special, so if it's a front hexes, that means they still have a reaction zone even when they're in medium density terrain or high density terrain hexes where there are no zones of control. They retain that reaction fire zone. The French roll 91, which would be a morale check -15. They roll a 68, so they're still good, the French. So now they're going to go ahead and assault these guys. So now that these guys are in a fortified post and they're a battalion instead of a company, you can see they've got 2 pips on the top of their counter instead of 1, designating them as the NATO battalion designation. So they're not going to withdraw, they're going to stand. So we do attacker morale check, which is the first thing. So this is where their -10 for the assault is going to come in. They roll a 40, which looks like they're going to fail with the -15. So that means they're going to become shaken and fall back a hex. And their assault is done. And these guys in the church, even though they didn't break, they were still involved in an assault. So they need to be marked with disorder. And same with these guys. I forgot to mark them as an assault also. So they're in disorder. Pretty much after an assault, everybody ends up in disorder or shaken, or worse if they break. Okay, so then the last assault, it's all the same thing again. So this guy will go back 2 hexes to there. He will advance in column. He's already in disorder, so he remains in disorder. Then this stack and this stack will both get reaction fire, but they're now -1, so he's got 4, so he'll be -1 for the skirmisher and -1 because he's in disorder, so that'll be on the 2. 0-0, that's complete miss. And this stack will also get reaction fire, and it's also on the 2. 62 is a morale check -10. And the French roll a 33, which they will fail because of the -5 and the -15, so they will become shaken and go back 1. And they're still in line at that point. And their assault is done. Okay, so that's it for the close combat segment, which French kind of cleared the front hexes of the village, but didn't really manage to hold on to much, which is pretty typical. It's a very tough nut to crack, the village. Okay, so what's different about the brigade game is we have fatigue. So every brigade that fired anything other than skirmish fire or artillery fire or engaged in close combat has to take a fatigue check. And we have some fatigue check markers. So the British will have to take a fatigue check, which we can put that on any hex of the garrison. And the French brigades will also have to make fatigue checks. So we put that by the leader for the brigades. We'll just put it there with the LOB marker. And so then when we get to the fatigue check phase, which we are at now, then we roll fatigue. And let's see if I can remember what the die rolls are. There it is, the fatigue chart. So if we roll a 0, the fatigue level goes up by 1, and there's 4 fatigue levels, no fatigue, fatigue 1, fatigue 2, fatigue 3, which is the maximum value. A 1 to a 9 is no effect. If you engage in close combat, it's -1, so basically there's a 20% chance if you engage in close combat of getting a fatigue level. So we roll for the British and the French. Actually, just roll for the French at this point, since it's their turn. So they rolled a 2, which is just enough to stay out of fatigue level. So we'll take their, I guess I got to roll for each brigade, excuse me. So roll for that brigade first, then this brigade. And he rolls a 4, so they're out of risk of fatigue. So once you hit fatigue level 3, you can pull your guys back and get them out of combat range and enter fatigue recovery. If they engage in combat or get fired upon, then the fatigue recovery marker goes away and they can't recover fatigue. So that's something that's unique about the Brigade game and is required if you play the Marshals game scenario of Unclaimed Victory. Okay, so that's it for the French turn. Then on to the second player turn, which we go to the recovery segment for the British, so they'll get to recover any of these disordered guys that are not in Zoc. And again, there's no Zocs in the MDT village hexes. So we'll just go through these quickly. 36, no, yep. 69, yep. 49, 45, 46, and 68. So everybody recovered. So much for the French attempt to do much. Okay, then on to the fire combat segment. So the guys with the red circled bugle can fire at 3 hex range. So they could fire at that stack or that stack. These guys do not have a line of sight to there. So they can fire at the skirmishers. So he'll fire there. -76 on the 0 column because he's going to be -2 because he's a skirmish and he's one company will be, well no, just 0. So 76 is the morale check, -10. He passes, and so it goes on like that as we go down the line. He can fire at 2 hex range, so he could fire at either of those guys. These guys have no skirmishers anymore. These guys are in skirmish order and can fire at those guys. This rifle armed guy to fire there needs I guess these guys firing at there would only get a fire strength of 2, which I did correctly. Yeah. Can fire at that guy. These guys have no skirmishers out, so they can't fire. I'll go through that quickly and then restart them. So nothing really changed from all that fire combat from the British. We now have the artillery segment, so the French now can fire their artillery fire at these, and we will fire at the targets we can see. And I'll resolve that and then start the video again. Okay, so the artillery fire had no effect. We marked it up on our artillery sheet there, keeping track of the ammunition we spent. Then on to the movement segment for the British, which if we recall, everybody in the garrison had the reserve order. So they cannot move at this time. They've already done their movement for the turn. The exception is this guy who's currently out of command, so he's going to move 1 hex into the village. There, so now he'll be part of the garrison. And he will be in command of the garrison on the following turn. Okay, so the French have no reserve movement, so they don't have anything. There's no close combat. Nobody's declared any assaults since nobody can really move. Then we do a fatigue check. So the British will have to do their fatigue check for the garrison. So they will have to roll greater than a 1 to have no fatigue. They roll a 6, so they're good. So that means their fatigue check is done. And that's it for the turn for these guys. So now it's kind of a mess, and the French will probably take a turn to recover some of their units. Okay, so that's it. You can see for this turn, I'll do the next turn in another video, and you can see that this was probably an ill-advised attack by Loisson. He should have sent in more troops. But he probably really didn't know what was there. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and tune in next time. Thanks.